Across Earth, sirens wailed in cities that had not heard such sounds in centuries. But there was no panic. Humanity had prepared for this day, generation after generation. Every child learned the evacuation procedures. Every city had shelters that could withstand orbital bombardment. Every citizen knew that if this day came, they would either survive together or fall together. In space, the Vrex fleet moved closer. Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the display. The small blue planet looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. He had studied human history and found it amusing. They had once been warriors, he knew, but that was centuries ago. They had grown soft. They would break easily. Begin the bombardment, Thrax ordered. Target their major population centers. I want them to know the price of defiance. The Vrex warships opened fire. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds streaked through space toward Earth. The human defense fleet moved to intercept, their small ships firing desperately at the overwhelming force. It looked like a slaughter. It looked like the end of humanity's story in the galaxy. But deep beneath Earth's surface, in facilities hidden for 2 centuries, something was waking up. Power cores that had been maintained but never used hummed to life. Weapon systems checked targeting data. Ships that the galaxy believed were museums or monuments began to move. Admiral Torres stood in the command center, watching the display as the Vrex bombardment began. Around her, men and women worked at their stations with grim efficiency. They wore uniforms that no one in the galaxy had seen before, marked with insignia from Earth's military history. Casualties? Torres asked quietly. Beijing, New Delhi, and Cairo have been hit. Shields are holding, but we've lost civilians in the outer districts. Estimated 3 million dead in the first strike. Torres closed her eyes for just a moment. 3 million dead. 3 million people who would never see tomorrow. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never hold their families again. When she opened her eyes, they were hard as diamond. Release the fleet, she said. All of it. Show them what humanity really is. Show them why we chose to hide. Across the Sol system, humanity's true military revealed itself. From the dark side of the moon, hundreds of warships emerged from underground bays. From Mars, entire fleets rose from beneath the red dust. From the asteroid belt, vessels that had pretended to be mining ships dropped their disguises and activated weapons that made the Vrex arsenal look primitive. The memorial arsenals were open. The sleeping giant was awake. And it was very, very angry. Commander Thrax was watching the destruction of Earth's defense fleet with satisfaction when his sensor officer made a confused sound. Sir, I'm detecting new contacts. Hundreds of them. They're appearing all over the system. Reinforcements? Thrax asked. From which species? They're human, sir, but our intelligence said they only had 300 ships. Thrax looked at the display. The 300 human vessels they had easily destroyed were nothing. But now the screen filled with new contacts. Hundreds became thousands. Ship signatures that matched no known human design filled the system. Where did they come from? Thrax demanded. His tactical officer's voice shook. Sir, they were hiding. In the moon. In the planets. In the asteroids. They've been there all along. For the first time in his military career, Commander Thrax felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human fleet began to move, and the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The Vrex fleet had been in the Sol system for 8 hours when Commander Thrax realized he had made a terrible mistake. His 3,000 warships, the pride of the Dominion, suddenly seemed very small compared to what was emerging from Earth's hidden bases. On his command bridge, warning lights flashed red across every console. His sensor officers shouted conflicting reports, their voices rising in panic. Outside the viewport, space itself seemed to come alive with human vessels. Report, Thrax roared, his forearms gripping the command rails. Sir, we count at least 2,000 new contacts and the number keeps growing, his tactical officer said, mandibles clicking nervously. They're using stealth technology we've never seen before. They were there the entire time, and we didn't detect them until they activated. Thrax stared at the tactical display. Human ships were appearing like ghosts, emerging from hiding spots throughout the solar system. They moved with a coordination that spoke of decades of planning. These were not the clumsy ceremonial vessels the Dominion had easily destroyed. These ships moved like predators. What is their combat strength? Thrax demanded. The tactical officer hesitated. Sir, their weapon signatures don't match anything in our database. We have no baseline for comparison. On Earth below, the cities burned in places where the Vrex bombardment had broken through the shields. Beijing's eastern districts were rubble. New Delhi's ancient temples were ash. Cairo's pyramids, which had stood for 5,000 years, were cracked and smoking. In the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Sarah Torres watched the casualty reports climb. 4 million dead now, then 5 million. Every number represented someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. Admiral, all fleet groups report ready, her operations officer said. We have 4,200 vessels active with another 1,000 coming online within the hour. Torres nodded slowly. Around her, the command center hummed with controlled energy. Every person at their station knew what was at stake. They had trained for this day their entire lives, hoping it would never come. The military tradition of Earth had been kept alive in secret, passed from generation to generation like a sacred trust. Now that trust would be tested. Open a channel to the Vrex flagship, Torres ordered. The communications officer worked for a moment, then nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Torres stood straight, her uniform crisp despite the long hours. Behind her, a display showed the Earth with its wounded cities, the scars of the Vrex attack visible even from orbit. Commander Thrax of the Vrex Dominion, this is Admiral Sarah Torres of the Earth Defense Force. You have attacked our home. You have killed our people. You were given every chance to choose peace, but you chose war. Now you will learn the difference between fighting those who cannot defend themselves and fighting those who choose not to. Thrax's face appeared on the screen. His reptilian features twisted in confusion and growing fear. Your fleet was destroyed. We counted your ships, 300 ceremonial vessels. We destroyed them all. You destroyed what we let you see, Torres replied, her voice cold as vacuum. Did you really think that a species which nearly destroyed itself would forget how to make war? We didn't forget, Commander. We remembered every lesson, every terrible innovation, every weapon that we swore we would never use for conquest. But we kept them for this moment. For the day someone decided we were easy prey. She leaned forward slightly. You attacked Earth believing we were weak. You will leave this system knowing the truth if you leave it all. Torres made a cutting motion and the channel closed. She turned to her fleet commanders. All groups execute attack pattern Omega. I want that fleet scattered and their command structure disrupted. Show them what 2 centuries of technological development looks like when you're not busy conquering your neighbors. The human fleet moved as one. Ships that looked sleek and deadly accelerated to speeds that should have torn them apart. But humanity had learned to manipulate gravity, to create fields that protected their vessels from the incredible forces. They had learned in secret during the long years of peace, never stopping their research even as they presented a face of artistic culture to the galaxy. The Vrex fleet fired first, launching thousands of plasma torpedoes and kinetic rounds. It was a devastating barrage, enough to level planets. The human ships responded with electronic countermeasures that the Vrex had never encountered. Missiles lost their locks and spiraled into empty space. Targeting systems crashed and had to be rebooted. Then the human ships fired back. Thrax watched in horror as his fleet began to die. Human weapons struck with impossible precision. Railgun rounds moving at a significant fraction of light speed punched through Vrex armor. Like it was paper, particle beams cut warships in half with surgical accuracy. But worst of all were the missiles. The human missiles moved like they were alive. They dodged point defense fire with impossible maneuvers. When one was destroyed, 3 others would adjust their approach vectors. They worked together in swarms, overwhelming defenses through sheer coordination. Thrax realized with growing dread that the missiles were being controlled by artificial intelligence, something the Galactic Council had banned centuries ago. But humanity had never signed that particular treaty. They had kept their AI development secret, refining it, perfecting it, binding it with safeguards learned from painful experience. Now those AI systems coordinated a battle with an efficiency that no organic mind could match. Return fire, Thrax screamed. All ships, pattern Gamma. Concentrate your fire. The Vrex fleet tried to rally. They were experienced warriors, veterans of a dozen conquest campaigns, but they had never fought an enemy like this. Human ships seemed to know where the Vrex would fire before they pulled the trigger. They slipped through the bombardment with minimal damage, their shields flaring but holding. A Vrex dreadnought, one of the largest ships in the fleet, exploded in a brilliant flash. Then another. Then 3 more in quick succession. Human vessels moved through the debris, firing as they went, never stopping, never slowing. On the HFY flagship, damage reports flooded in. "Sir, we've lost 200 ships in the first 20 minutes. Their weapons are more advanced than anything we've encountered. Our shields can't compensate." Thrax felt his certainty crumbling. This was not how battles went. The Dominion conquered. The Dominion was strong. How could these soft humans, these artists and poets, be destroying his fleet? "All ships fall back to defensive formation," Thrax ordered. "We need to regroup," but the human fleet didn't allow it. They pressed their advantage with a ruthlessness that shocked the HFY's commander. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, cutting off retreat paths, herding the HFY's vessels into kill zones where multiple ships could concentrate fire. In the asteroid belt, a group of HFY's cruisers tried to hide among the rocks. They thought they could use the natural cover to ambush human ships. But the humans had been mining those asteroids for centuries. They knew every rock, every hiding place. Kinetic rounds fired from concealed platforms struck the HFY's cruisers from 6 different directions simultaneously. The ships had no chance. They were torn apart by tungsten rods moving at velocities that turned them into miniature meteors. Back on Earth, people huddled in shelters and watched the battle on emergency broadcasts. They saw their fleet, the fleet they had never known existed, tearing through the HFY's formation. They saw human ships with names like Remembrance, Never Again, and Final Peace engaging the enemy with controlled fury. In one shelter beneath Tokyo, an old woman held her granddaughter. The child had been crying since the bombardment began, but now she watched the screens in confused awe. "Grandmother, I thought we were peaceful people," the girl said. The old woman's eyes were wet with tears, but she smiled grimly. "We are peaceful, child, but peace is not the same as helplessness. We choose peace because we know the cost of war. But when war comes to us, when someone attacks our home, we remember everything our ancestors learned. We remember how to survive." Admiral Torres watched the battle unfold with no satisfaction, only grim determination. Every HFY ship destroyed was a tragedy in its own way. Those ships had crews, people who believed they were serving their empire, following orders. But they had attacked Earth. They had killed millions. And Torres's duty was clear. "Admiral, the HFY's fleet is attempting to retreat," her tactical officer reported. "They're forming up around their flagship and trying to move out of the system." Torres considered for a moment. She could let them go, send them running with their tail between their legs. But that would only delay the inevitable. The HFY's would regroup, gather more ships, and try again. Or worse, they would attack another target, believing that humanity's defense was limited to the Sol system. "No," Torres said quietly. "They came here for war. Let them have it. All fleet groups pursue, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Disable where possible. Target engines and weapons. I want prisoners who can tell the galaxy what happened here." The human fleet surged forward. They caught the retreating HFY ships and hammered them with precision fire. Human captains, trained in simulations that had been running for 200 years, executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. They spun their ships on impossible axes, fired while accelerating in different directions, and coordinated their attacks with millisecond timing. On the HFY's flagship, Thrax knew he was beaten. His fleet of 3,000 had been reduced to less than 1,000 in just 4 hours. Human ships surrounded him on all sides. His shields were failing. His weapons were exhausted. "Sir, incoming message from the human fleet," his communications officer said. Thrax almost refused to accept it. But pride would not save his remaining crews. He nodded, and Admiral Torres appeared on his screen once more. "Commander Thrax, your fleet is broken. Your ships are destroyed or disabled. You came to conquer, but you have been defeated. I am offering you one chance. Surrender now. Have your remaining ships power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. You will be prisoners, but you will live." Thrax wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to fight to the death. But he looked around his bridge at his crew. Many were injured. All were exhausted and afraid. He had led them into this disaster through his own arrogance. "And if I refuse?" Thrax asked. Torres's expression didn't change. "Then we will destroy every remaining ship. I take no pleasure in killing, Commander, but I will do what is necessary to protect my people. Choose now." Thrax looked at his tactical display one more time. The human fleet surrounded him completely. Their weapons were charged and ready. He had no moves left to make. We surrender, Thrak said, his voice hollow. All Vrek ships power down weapons. Prepare for capture. Across the battlefield, Vrek's vessels went dark. Human ships moved in, boarding parties ready, medical teams standing by. The first battle was over. But as Admiral Torres knew, this was only the beginning. The Vrek's Dominion's homeworlds would not accept this defeat. They would gather more ships, call in favors, and return for revenge. The question was what humanity would do about it. Torres opened a channel to Ambassador Chen, who was still at the Galactic Council station. Marcus, it's done. The Vrek's fleet is destroyed or captured. Chen's face appeared on the screen. Behind him, Torres could see crowds of alien species watching broadcasts of the battle. Their expressions ranged from shock to fear to calculation. The galaxy knows now, Chen said. They've seen what we can do. The question is what we do next. Torres looked at the display showing Earth still burning in places, still wounded. We make sure this never happens again, she said. We show the galaxy that humanity will defend itself, and we show them that there is a cost for attacking those who cannot fight back. She paused, then added, and Marcus, this isn't over. The Vrek's Dominion won't accept this defeat. They'll come again with everything they have. I know, Chen replied, which is why we need to take the fight to them. We can't just defend anymore. We need to end this threat permanently. Torres nodded slowly. It was the moment she had been dreading. Defending Earth was one thing. Taking the war to the enemy's home was another. It meant fully abandoning the peaceful path humanity had walked for 2 centuries. But looking at the casualties, at the millions of dead, Torres knew there was no choice. The Vreks had to be stopped and stopped permanently, or they would be back. And next time they would know what to expect. Prepare the fleet, Torres said. We're going to Vrek space. It's time the galaxy learned the full lesson. When you attack Earth, you don't just face Earth. You face everything humanity can bring to bear. The word went out across the human networks. The fleet would advance. The war had begun in earnest, and the galaxy, watching in stunned silence, realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. The sleeping giant was not just awake. It was on the march. The Vrek's home system of Draxnor was located 300 light-years from Earth, deep in what the Galactic Council considered contested space. It was a fortress system with 4 habitable worlds and defensive stations that had never been breached in 500 years of Dominion expansion. The Vrek's High Command believed it was untouchable. They were wrong. Admiral Sarah Torres stood on the bridge of the EDS Indomitable, humanity's new flagship. The ship had been built in secret over the past 50 years, assembled in pieces in hidden facilities throughout the Sol system. It was 5 kilometers long, armed with weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics and protected by shields that could withstand the detonation of a small sun. Around her, the human fleet had gathered. Over 3,000 warships, with more joining every day as the memorial arsenals across human space came fully online. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed their true nature. Space stations that looked like research facilities opened their hidden bays to release fighters and bombers. Even the colonies on Mars and Europa contributed vessels from secret shipyards. All fleet groups report ready, Commander Jackson said from the tactical station. He was young for his rank, barely 40, but he had trained his entire life for this. Every human military officer had, preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Torres looked at the strategic display. It showed the jump route to Draxnor, carefully plotted by human scouts who had been mapping Vrek space for decades. The galaxy thought humanity had no intelligence network, no spy operations. They were wrong about that too. Open a fleet-wide channel, Torres ordered. Channel open, Admiral. Torres took a breath. She knew that this moment would be recorded, analyzed, remembered. She chose her words carefully. This is Admiral Torres to all ships. 2 weeks ago, the Vrek's Dominion attacked Earth. They killed 5 million of our people. They destroyed our cities. They did this because they believed we were weak. They believed that a peaceful people would be easy victims. She paused. They learned differently. We defended our home. We destroyed their fleet. But defense is not enough. The Dominion must understand that attacking humanity carries a cost that extends far beyond a single battle. Torres looked around the bridge at her crew. They were focused, professional, ready. We are not going to Draxnor for conquest. We are not going there for revenge, though many would say revenge is justified. We are going there to send a message that the entire galaxy will hear. Humanity will defend itself. Humanity will defend others who cannot defend themselves, and any species that chooses war with us will learn that we mastered war long before we chose peace. She straightened. We remember the final war. We remember what we almost became. We swore we would never wage war for conquest or domination, but we also swore we would never be victims again. Today we keep that promise. All ships prepare for jump. Destination Draxnor. Let's finish this. The fleet engaged their jump drives. Space twisted and folded as humanity's vessels slipped into faster-than-light travel. The technology was human-developed, refined over 2 centuries, more efficient than the standard galactic drives. Where a normal fleet would take weeks to reach Draxnor, the human fleet would arrive in 3 days. On Earth, the recovery efforts continued. Cities were being rebuilt. The dead were being mourned. But there was no panic, no chaos. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They would survive this too. In the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Marcus Chen watched as representatives from 200 species argued about what to do. The broadcast of Earth's battle with the Vrex fleet had shocked the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive now scrambled to reassess their positions. The Aquelian delegate, who had laughed at Chen just weeks before, now spoke in somber tones. We had no idea humanity possessed such military capacity. The question before us is what we do about it. Do about it? Chen repeated. We defended our home. What would you have us do? Allow ourselves to be slaughtered? A Pelian representative, her many eyes blinking nervously, spoke up. But Ambassador Chen, your fleet is now moving toward Vrex space. This is no longer defense. This is invasion. Chen stood, his patience finally exhausted. The Vrex Dominion has conquered 17 systems in the past year. They have enslaved populations. They have destroyed civilizations. This council did nothing. When they attacked Earth, you did nothing. Now that we defend ourselves, suddenly you're concerned about the rules of war. He looked around the chamber. Let me be very clear. Humanity did not want this war. We spent 2 centuries building a peaceful society. We contributed to galactic culture. We shared our art, our music, our literature. We asked for nothing but to be left alone. The Vrex decided that made us weak. They were wrong. Chen's voice hardened. Our fleet is going to Draxnor to end the threat the Vrex Dominion poses. Not just to Earth, but to every peaceful species in the galaxy. When we're done, the Dominion will no longer have the capacity to wage aggressive war. Consider it our contribution to galactic peace. And if other species feel threatened by your military power? The Aquelian asked. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Then they should remember this moment. Remember that humanity chose peace for 200 years. Remember that we only revealed our true strength when forced to. And remember that any species that attacks us or our allies will face the same fate as the Vrex. The chamber fell silent. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer playing by the old rules. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. 3 days later, the human fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the Draxnor system. Admiral Torres expected to find it defended, and she was right. The Vrex had assembled every available warship, pulling vessels from a dozen systems. Over 5,000 ships waited in defensive formations around the primary world. They knew we were coming, Commander Jackson observed. Of course they did, Torres replied. We made sure of it. Open a channel to the Vrex High Command. The face that appeared on screen was old for a Vrex, his scales graying, his eyes shrewd. Supreme Commander Vexkoth had led the Dominion's military for 30 years. He was a brilliant strategist and a ruthless leader. Admiral Torres, Vexkoth hissed, you have made a grave mistake coming here. This is not a lone fleet in human space. This is the full might of the Dominion gathered to destroy you. Is it? Torres asked calmly. Let me tell you what I see, Supreme Commander. I see a fleet that's been assembled in panic. Ships that have been pulled from occupation duties and haven't trained together. Crews that are exhausted from forced marches. A defensive formation that has 6 critical weaknesses, 4 of which you probably haven't noticed yet. Vexkoth's eyes narrowed. You cannot defeat us. We have the numbers. You had the numbers at Earth too, Torres replied. How did that work out? Supreme Commander, I'm going to make you an offer, and I'm only going to make it once. Surrender. Disarm your fleet. Submit to occupation and disarmament. Your people will be treated fairly under the laws of war. Your civilians will not be harmed. But the Dominion's capacity for aggressive war will be ended. Never, Vexkoth roared. The Dominion does not surrender. We will fight to the last ship, the last warrior. Torres nodded as if she had expected this. Then you'll die for pride. How many of your people have to burn because you can't admit you made a mistake attacking Earth? How many Vrex worlds have to be scarred because your ego won't let you accept reality? She leaned forward. You thought humans were weak. You thought wrong. Now you have a choice. End this with honor, or end this with your civilization in ruins. Decide. Vexkoth cut the channel. Torres turned to her fleet commanders. He's going to fight. Commence Opération Raptor Strike. I want their command structure disrupted, and their formations scattered. Show them what human tactical doctrine really looks like. The human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each moving with perfect coordination. They didn't attack head-on like the Vrex expected. Instead, they used the system's asteroid belts, gas giants, and even the star's gravity well to mask their approach vectors. Human ships appeared from unexpected directions, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before the Vrex could respond effectively. It was a tactic as old as warfare itself, but executed with technology and coordination the Vrex couldn't match. Small human craft, barely larger than shuttles, slipped through the Vrex formations. They carried electronic warfare packages that jammed communications and corrupted targeting data. Vrex ships found themselves firing at phantom contacts while real human vessels attacked from their blind spots. Sir, their formation is breaking down, Jackson reported. Their command network is fragmenting. Individual ships are reverting to autonomous operation. Good, Torres said. Now hit them with the hammer. All heavy units execute firing plan Alpha. Target their capital ships. Human dreadnoughts, massive vessels bristling with weapons, emerged from behind a gas giant where they had been hiding. They opened fire with railguns that could punch holes through planets. Vrex capital ships, the pride of the Dominion fleet, shattered under the bombardment. But Torres didn't just use brute force. Human ships carried weapons the Vrex had never encountered. Nanomachine clouds that ate through ship hulls. Gravitational mines that crushed vessels into compact debris. Directed energy weapons that bypassed shields entirely by phasing through different dimensions. Every weapon had been developed during humanity's long centuries of secret research. Every tactic had been refined in simulations run by artificial intelligence that could model millions of combat scenarios. The Vrex were fighting 2 centuries of human innovation, and they were losing. Supreme Commander Vexkoth watched his fleet die with growing horror. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans were showing the galaxy what they could do, using his fleet as an example. All ships fall back to planetary defense positions, Vexkoth ordered. We'll make them pay for every meter. But the human fleet pursued relentlessly. They drove the Vrex back to their home world, destroying ships that tried to make a stand. When the Vrex retreated behind their planetary shields, human ships simply waited, forming a blockade that nothing could penetrate. Torres opened a channel to the Vrex homeworld, broadcasting on every frequency. People of the Vrex Dominion, this is Admiral Sarah Torres of the Earth Defense Force. Your military attacked our home. They killed millions of our people. Your leaders told you humanity was weak. They were wrong. Now your fleet is destroyed. Your system is blockaded, and your leaders have a choice to make. She paused, letting the words sink in. We don't want to kill civilians. We don't want to destroy your cities, but we will do what's necessary to ensure you never threaten Earth or any other peaceful world again. Tell your leaders to surrender. End this war before more people die. You have 24 hours. The channel closed. Torres turned to her staff. Deploy the ground forces. If they don't surrender, we're going to disable every military installation on all 4 worlds simultaneously, and we're going to do it with minimal civilian casualties because that's what separates us from them. In the transport ships, human soldiers prepared for deployment. They wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any organic soldier. They carried weapons that ranged from non-lethal stunners to plasma rifles that could melt through starship hulls. But more importantly, they had training that emphasized restraint, precision, and the protection of non-combatants. Humanity had learned the hard way during their own final war, what happened when soldiers forgot that the enemy was also people. They had learned that winning a war but losing your humanity was the worst defeat of all. The 24 hours passed. The Vrex High Command did not surrender. Admiral Torres gave the order, and the human ground forces deployed. They struck at military targets across all 4 Vrex worlds simultaneously, using precision that shocked the galaxy. Power plants were disabled with surgical strikes. Command centers were neutralized by special forces teams. Weapons factories were demolished while the surrounding cities remained untouched. The Vrex military tried to resist, but they were outmatched. Human soldiers moved through their defenses like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles, using technology and tactics the Vrex had no counter for. Within 12 hours, every major military installation on all 4 worlds was captured or destroyed. Supreme Commander Vexkoth sat in his bunker beneath the capital city, watching his civilization's military power crumble. A human strike team breached the bunker's defenses as if they weren't there. They disarmed his guards without killing them and stood before him, weapons ready but not firing. The team leader removed her helmet. She was a human woman with dark skin and calm eyes. Supreme Commander Vexkoth, I am Major Reeves of the Earth Defense Force. You are under arrest for war crimes against humanity. Will you come peacefully, or do we need to use force? Vexkoth looked at the soldiers surrounding him. They were professional, controlled, ready, but not eager to kill. In that moment, he understood what humanity really was. Not soft, not weak, but disciplined. They had the power to destroy his entire civilization, but they chose restraint. I will surrender, Vexkoth said quietly. But tell me, Major, why didn't you just destroy us from orbit? You had the power. Major Reeves holstered her weapon. Because we're not you, Supreme Commander. We don't wage war on civilians. We don't destroy for the sake of destruction. We fight to win, but we fight with honor. That's what you never understood about humanity. We're not weak because we're peaceful. We're peaceful because we're strong enough to be. She gestured to her team. Let's go. The Admiral wants to show the galaxy that humanity knows how to win a war without losing its soul. As Vexkoth was led away, he realized the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Dominion militarily. They had defeated everything the Dominion believed about strength and power, and that defeat was far more complete than any battlefield loss could ever be. The siege of Draxnor lasted 3 weeks. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated the full scope of their military capabilities. It wasn't just the advanced weapons or the superior ships. It was the intelligence network that seemed to know every Vrex movement before it happened. It was the psychological warfare that demoralized enemy troops without firing a shot. It was the precision of strikes that destroyed military targets while leaving civilians unharmed. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session every day. Ambassador Marcus Chen attended each one, and each day more species looked at him with new eyes. Fear, respect, calculation. The comfortable assumptions about humanity had been shattered forever. On the 15th day of the siege, the Aquelian delegate approached Chen privately. Ambassador, may I speak with you? Chen nodded and they moved to a private chamber. The Aquelian floated in its tank, its tentacles moving in patterns that the translator interpreted as nervousness. I owe you an apology, the Aquelian said. I laughed at you when you warned us about the Vrex. I dismissed your people as insignificant. I was a fool. Chen's expression softened slightly. You weren't alone. The entire galaxy made the same mistake, but why? The Aquelian asked. Why hide what you truly were? Why pretend to be weak? Chen walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Because we knew what we were capable of. 230 years ago, my people nearly destroyed themselves. We fought a war that killed billions. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons. Things I hope you never have to understand. We came so close to extinction that the survivors made a choice. Never again. We would be better. We would choose peace. He turned back to the Aquelian. But we're not naive. We knew the galaxy had predators. So we prepared. We built weapons we swore we'd never use for conquest. We trained soldiers for wars we hoped would never come. And we hid it all because we didn't want the galaxy to fear us. We wanted to be judged by our art and our culture, not by our capacity for violence. And now? The Aquelian asked. Now the secret is out, Chen said quietly. Now the galaxy knows what humanity can do. The question is what we do with that knowledge. Do we become the thing we fought so hard not to be? Or do we prove that strength and restraint can coexist? Back in the Draxnor system, Admiral Torres faced the same question every day. She watched the reports from the occupied worlds where human forces maintained order while dismantling the Dominion's military infrastructure. There had been incidents. Some Vrex civilians had attacked human soldiers. A few human soldiers had responded with excessive force. Each incident was investigated, and those responsible were punished regardless of species. Admiral, we have a situation on Draxnor Prime, Commander Jackson reported. A Vrex resistance group has taken human hostages. They're threatening to execute them unless we withdraw from the planet. Torres felt her jaw tighten. How many hostages? 12. Medical personnel who were treating wounded Vrek soldiers. Of course, Torres thought bitterly. The people trying to help would be the ones taken. What are they demanding? Complete withdrawal of human forces and restoration of Vrek sovereignty. They claim we're no better than the Dominion, that we're conquerors wearing a mask of righteousness. Torres studied the tactical display showing the location of the hostages. It would be easy to send in a strike team. Human special forces could probably extract the hostages with minimal casualties. But minimal wasn't zero, and the hostages were medics who had volunteered to help their former enemies. Open a channel to the resistance group, Torres ordered. Admiral, is that wise? Jackson asked. Negotiating with terrorists sends the wrong message. I'm not negotiating, Torres replied. I'm talking. There's a difference. A few minutes later, a Vrek's face appeared on the screen. He was young, barely an adult, with scales still bright with youth. Behind him, Torres could see the human hostages. They looked frightened but unharmed. I am Admiral Torres. You're the one holding my people? I am Kelvar of the Draxnor Liberation Front, the young Vrek said, trying to sound brave but unable to hide his nervousness. We demand that you leave our world immediately, or what? Torres asked calmly. You'll kill medical personnel? People who came here to heal the wounded, including your wounded? Kelvar faltered slightly. You invaded our system. You destroyed our fleet. You occupy our worlds. You're no different than any other conqueror. Torres leaned forward. Kelvar, let me tell you something about conquest. When a conquering force occupies a world, they loot it. They enslave the population. They rape and murder without restraint. Is that what human forces have done? You've destroyed our military, Kelvar protested. Yes, the military that attacked Earth and killed 5 million of my people. The military that your supreme commander ordered to bombard civilian cities. Should I have let them keep their weapons so they could attack someone else? Torres shook her head. Kelvar, I'm going to be honest with you. I can send a team to get my people back. They're very good at what they do. But some of your people would die, and that's something I'd rather avoid. She paused. I know you don't trust me. Why should you? From your perspective, we're invaders. But let me offer you something. Come meet with me in person. Bring representatives from your resistance. See what we're actually doing on your worlds. If after that you still believe we're conquerors, I'll listen to your grievances. But let my medical people go first. They've done nothing wrong. Kelvar looked uncertain. This is a trick. It's not. I give you my word. Whatever that's worth to you, I give it. Let them go, and let's talk like civilized people. There was a long silence. Then Kelvar nodded slowly. The hostages will be released. But we will hold you to your word, Admiral. 6 hours later, Kelvar and 3 other Rex resistance members sat in a conference room on the Indomitable, surrounded by human guards. They had been searched but not restrained, treated with wary respect rather than contempt. Torres entered the room and dismissed the guards. Just me and them, Commander Jackson. Wait outside. Admiral, that's not safe. They're not here to kill me, Torres said calmly. They're here to understand why we came. Let us talk. When they were alone, Torres sat across from the Vrex. Thank you for releasing the hostages. You gave your word we could speak freely, Kelvar said. We want to know the truth. Why did you come here? What do you want from our worlds? Torres pulled up a holographic display. It showed the Vrex Dominion's conquests over the past decade. 17 systems, hundreds of billions of sentient beings enslaved or killed. This is why we came. Your government has been waging aggressive war across the galaxy for years. The Galactic Council did nothing. When you attacked Earth, you thought we'd be easy victims. We proved otherwise. She changed the display to show human forces on the Vrex worlds. Look at what we're actually doing. We're dismantling military installations. We're destroying weapons of conquest. But we're not touching civilian infrastructure. We're providing food and medicine. We're treating your wounded. You've killed thousands of our soldiers, one of the other Vrex said. In battle, yes, Torres acknowledged. War is killing. But look at the numbers, truly look at them. Your military killed 5 million civilians on Earth in one bombardment. How many Vrex civilians have died since we arrived? 43, all in crossfire or accidents. We've gone to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties. Kelvar stared at the numbers. I don't understand. If you have this power, why show restraint? Torres met his eyes. Because my people learned a terrible lesson long ago. We learned that winning a war by becoming monsters means you've already lost. Kelvar, humanity nearly destroyed itself. We built weapons that could crack planets. We used them on our own world. Billions died. And when it was over, the survivors had to ask themselves a question. What are we? Are we just killers with technology? Or are we something better? She stood and walked to the window looking out at Draxnor Prime. We chose to be better. We chose to build a civilization based on art and science and culture. But we didn't forget how to fight. We couldn't, not in a galaxy with species like the Dominion. So we prepared. And when your leaders attacked us, they forced us to remember everything we'd tried to leave behind. Torres turned back to the Vrex. But here's the difference. We remember why we stopped. We remember the price of unchecked violence. So even in war, even when we have the power to annihilate you, we choose restraint, because that's what separates civilization from barbarism. There was a long silence. Finally, Kelvar spoke, his voice quiet. What happens to us now? To our people? That depends on you, Torres replied. The Dominion's capacity for aggressive war is ended. That's not negotiable. But what comes next? That's up to the Vrex people. You can work with us to build a new government, one that doesn't conquer its neighbors. Or you can fight us and watch your civilization tear itself apart in a guerrilla war you can't win. She sat back down. I don't want to be an occupying force, Kelvar. I want to go home. I want to mourn my dead and rebuild my cities. But I won't leave until I'm certain that Earth is safe, that the species you've conquered are free, and that the Dominion will never threaten innocent people again. One of the other Vrex, an older female with graying scales, spoke up. You speak of choice, but you're the ones with the weapons. How is that a choice? Torres smiled grimly. You're right. It's not a fair choice. War never is, but it's more than your leaders gave Earth. It's more than you gave the 17 systems you conquered. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild with dignity. Take it or don't. But understand that the alternative is continuing a war that you've already lost. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. By the end, Kelvar and his companions had agreed to serve as liaisons between the Resistance and the human occupation force. They would help identify legitimate grievances and prevent misunderstandings from escalating into violence. As they were leaving, Kelvar paused at the door. Admiral Torres, why did you really agree to meet with us? You could have just sent your soldiers. Torres looked at the young Vrex. Because 40 years ago I was a lieutenant on Mars Station. We had a terrorist incident. Separatists who wanted independence. My commanding officer ordered an assault. We went in hard. When it was over, we'd killed the terrorists, but also 17 civilians who were just in the wrong place. I helped carry the bodies out. Her eyes were distant, remembering. I've never forgotten their faces. So when I have a choice between sending soldiers or talking, I talk first. Not because I'm weak, because I remember what violence costs, and I remember that the people on the other side, even when they're my enemies, they're still people. News of the meeting spread quickly. Across the occupied Vrex worlds, resistance groups began reaching out to human forces. Not all of them, and not without suspicion, but it was a start. Violence decreased. Cooperation increased. Slowly, carefully, a path forward emerged. The Galactic Council watched in amazement. They had expected humanity to crush the Vrex as brutally as the Vrex had crushed others. Instead, they saw a measured occupation focused on disarmament and reconstruction. It was unprecedented. Ambassador Chen used the moment to push for changes in galactic law. The Dominion attacked Earth because they believed the Council would do nothing. They were right. The Council watched as they conquered system after system. It was only when they attacked a species capable of defending itself that there were consequences. He looked around the chamber. We need to change that. We need a mutual defense pact. We need rapid response forces that can intervene when aggressive species threaten peaceful ones. And yes, humanity will contribute ships to that force. Not to dominate, not to conquer, but to ensure that what happened to Earth doesn't happen to anyone else. The Pelian delegate raised a concern. But Ambassador, if humanity leads this force, who ensures humanity doesn't abuse that power? Chen nodded. A valid concern, which is why I propose the force be overseen by a council drawn from neutral species. Humanity will contribute military assets, but we won't control how they're used. We'll be bound by the same laws as everyone else. It was a radical proposal. It would take months to negotiate the details. But for the first time in galactic history, species were seriously discussing how to prevent aggressive war, rather than just reacting to it. On the Indomitable, Admiral Torres received new orders from Earth. The Vrex military had been dismantled. A provisional government was forming. It was time to begin the withdrawal. But first, there was one more thing Torres needed to do. She ordered Supreme Commander Vexkoth brought to the bridge. The old Vrex looked diminished in human custody, his scales dull, his eyes weary. Supreme Commander, in 2 days we begin withdrawing our forces from your worlds. A Vrex provisional government will take control, supervised by Galactic Council observers. Your trial for war crimes will be held on a neutral world. Vexkoth said nothing. Torres continued. But before we go, I wanted you to understand something. We could have destroyed your civilization. We had the power. We chose not to because that's not who humanity is. We're not conquerors. We're defenders. Remember that. Remember it when you're sitting in your cell. Remember it when historians ask you why you attacked Earth. You didn't lose to a stronger military. You lost to a civilization that knew when to use violence and when to show mercy. The old Vrex finally looked up. You think that makes you better than us? No, Torres replied. It makes us different. Better is a judgment for history. But different? That we've proven. She gestured to the guards. Take him back to his cell. Make sure he's comfortable. Even defeated enemies deserve basic dignity. As Vexkoth was led away, Commander Jackson approached. Admiral Earth is asking when you'll be home. Torres looked at the tactical display one last time. The Vrex worlds were stabilizing. The threat was contained. The galaxy had learned that humanity would defend itself. Tell them soon, she said. Tell them we're coming home. The war is over. But even as she said it, Torres knew it wasn't truly over. The galaxy had changed. Humanity's secret was revealed. And whatever came next would be shaped by the choices made in these crucial weeks. She just hoped they had made the right ones. 3 months after the siege of Draxnor ended, Ambassador Marcus Chen stood before the Galactic Council once more. But this time the chamber felt different. The casual dismissiveness that had once greeted him was gone. Now when he spoke, the galaxy listened. The Vrex war is over, Chen began. The Dominion has surrendered unconditionally. Their military has been disbanded. Their conquered territories are in the process of being liberated and returned to their original governments. The species they enslaved are being freed. Supreme Commander Vexkoth and his senior leadership await trial for war crimes. He paused, letting the words settle. But the question before this council is not what happened. It's what happens next. The old order failed. It failed to stop the Vrex expansion. It failed to protect peaceful species. It failed because it was built on the assumption that aggressive species would respect treaties and honor agreements. The Vrex proved that assumption wrong. The Aquelian delegate spoke, its translator turning bubbling sounds into words. You propose humanity become the galaxy's police force? That we replace one dominant power with another? No, Chen replied firmly. I propose we build something better. A true mutual defense pact backed by real force. Not controlled by any single species, but representing all of us. An alliance that makes it clear. Attack one peaceful world and you face all of us. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Pelian delegates' many eyes blinked in what might have been skepticism. And humanity would join this alliance as an equal member? Despite your obvious military superiority? Chen smiled slightly. We would. Because we understand something that the Vrex never did. Real strength isn't about domination. It's about cooperation. Humanity could try to rule the galaxy by force. We have the weapons. We have the ships. But we'd fail, just like every empire that's tried. Because you can't build a civilization at gunpoint. You can only build it through trust. He pulled up a holographic display showing the human fleet beginning its withdrawal from Vrex space. Look, we're leaving. We dismantled their military capacity for aggressive war, and now we're going home. We're not annexing their worlds. We're not installing puppet governments. We're not extracting tribute. We came, we fought, we won, and now we're leaving because that's what we said we'd do. The chamber was silent as species that had spent centuries maneuvering for advantage tried to process this. It didn't fit any pattern they knew. Conquerors didn't leave. Victors didn't walk away from spoils. Chen continued. Humanity learned a lesson 2 centuries ago. We learned it in nuclear fire and biological weapons that turned continents into graveyards. We learned that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction. Now we offer that lesson to the galaxy. Join us, build something better, or don't and hope you never face an aggressor alone. The vote would take weeks, but Chen could see the momentum shifting. Fear was a powerful motivator, and every species that had watched the Vrex fleet die knew one truth. Humanity had shown restraint in victory, but they had also shown overwhelming power. Better to have them as allies than enemies. On Earth, the rebuilding continued. The cities that had been scarred by Vrek's bombardment were being reconstructed, but with a difference. Where Beijing's eastern districts had burned, new structures rose that incorporated both traditional Chinese architecture and modern defensive systems. The city would be beautiful again, but it would also be ready. Admiral Sarah Torres walked through one of these reconstruction zones, her uniform drawing respectful nods from the workers. She stopped at a memorial being built for those who had died in the attack. 5 million names would be carved into the black stone, a reminder of the cost of peace. A young woman approached her, wearing a construction crew's protective gear. "Admiral Torres, I wanted to thank you. My brother was in Beijing when the Vreks attacked. He didn't make it, but knowing that you stopped them, that you made sure they can't do it to anyone else, it helps." Torres felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. 5 million dead. 5 million families with holes that would never be filled. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "Don't be sorry," the woman replied. "Be proud. You did what had to be done. You protected us." After the woman left, Torres stood alone at the memorial. Commander Jackson found her there an hour later. "Admiral, you're wanted at the Global Defense Headquarters. They're making the announcement." Torres nodded and followed him to a waiting transport. The flight to the Rockies took 30 minutes. Deep beneath the mountains, in the command center that had coordinated Earth's defense, the leadership of every human nation had gathered. President Okonkwo of the United Earth Government stood at the podium. She was an elderly woman with white hair and eyes that had seen too much history. She had been a child during the final war, one of the survivors who had rebuilt from the ashes. "Citizens of Earth," she began, her voice carried across every broadcast network. 3 months ago, we faced an existential threat. An alien power attacked our world, believing we were weak. They learned differently. Today I stand before you to announce that the Vreks threat has been neutralized. Our people are safe. Our cities are being rebuilt. And the galaxy knows that Earth will defend itself. She paused, and her expression grew more serious. But we also face a choice. For 200 years we hid our true strength. We presented ourselves as artists and philosophers while maintaining the capacity for war in secret. That secret is now revealed. The question is, what do we do with the power we've shown? The president looked directly at the camera. We have received offers from dozens of species. Some want alliances. Some want to purchase our weapons. Some want us to fight their battles for them. But I stand here today to tell you what we will do. We will be exactly what we claimed to be for 2 centuries. We will be peaceful. We will be creators, not destroyers. But we will also be defenders. She gestured to Admiral Torres, who stepped forward. We are establishing the Earth Defense Force as a permanent military service. We will maintain our fleet. We will continue to develop defensive technology. And we will extend our protection to any peaceful species that requests it. Not as conquerors, not as overlords. As allies, Torres spoke, her voice steady. The memorial arsenals are no longer sealed. Our defensive capabilities are no longer hidden, but they will only be used to protect, never to conquer. We will train other species to defend themselves. We will share our technology with our allies, and we will ensure that what the Vreks did to Earth never happens to any peaceful world again. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Some species celebrated, relieved that the powerful humans were choosing cooperation. Others worried about the implications of human military forces active throughout the galaxy. But all of them knew that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. 6 months after the war ended, the Galactic Council met to vote on the Mutual Defense Charter. Ambassador Chen stood with representatives from 30 species that had signed on to the proposal. Together, they represented over half the Council's membership. "The vote is called," the Council speaker announced. "All those in favor of establishing the Galactic Mutual Defense Alliance?" Lights appeared across the chamber as species voted. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for abstention. When the count was complete, the results showed overwhelming approval. The galaxy had its first real defense pact. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed as weak just months before, was its founding member and largest military contributor. But the vote also included strict oversight provisions. Human forces would serve under joint command. Their deployment would require approval from a council representing multiple species. And, crucially, humanity's own actions would be subject to the same scrutiny as anyone else's. Chen signed the charter on behalf of Earth, his hand steady despite the historic moment. As he did, he thought about all the humans who had died to reach this point. The 5 million killed in the Vrex attack, the soldiers who fell in battle, the generations who had maintained the memorial arsenals, hoping they would never be needed. "We did it," Chen said quietly to Torres, who stood beside him as Earth's military representative. "We showed the galaxy that strength and peace can coexist." Torres nodded, but her expression remained cautious. "For now. But strength attracts challenges, Marcus. There will be others who test us, others who see our power and think they can take it or use it. Then we'll face them together," Chen replied. "Not just humanity. All of us." On the Vrex homeworld of Draxner Prime, the provisional government was holding its first free elections. The species that had defined itself through military conquest for centuries now had to learn to define itself through democracy. It was a difficult transition, full of setbacks and conflicts. But human advisors remained to help. Not to control, but to guide. They shared lessons from Earth's own difficult journey from destruction to peace. They showed that change was possible, that a species could choose a better path. Kelvar, the young Vrex who had once held human hostages, now served as a liaison between the human advisory team and the new Vrex government. He walked through the rebuilt capital city, past buildings that showed the scars of war but also the hope of reconstruction. A human advisor, Captain Sarah Chen, walked with him. She was Marcus Chen's daughter, volunteering to help with the rebuilding efforts. "Do you think we can really change?" Kelvar asked. "For 500 years we were warriors. We believed strength was everything. How do we just stop being that?" Sarah considered the question. "You don't stop being that. You transform it. Humanity didn't stop being capable of war. We just found better things to do with our strength. We became defenders instead of conquerors, teachers instead of tyrants. You can do the same." She pointed to a group of young Vrex students passing by, their scales bright with youth. "They don't remember the old dominion. They don't carry the weight of conquest. They can build something new. Your job is to make sure they have that chance." Kelvar watched the students, and for the first time in months he felt something like hope. "What if we fail? What if we fall back into old patterns? Then the galaxy will stop you," Sarah replied honestly. "That's what the Mutual Defense Alliance is for. But I don't think you'll fail. Do you know why? Why? Because you're asking the right questions. Because you care about doing better. That's the hardest part, and you're already doing it." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. On worlds that had been conquered by the Vrex, species were rebuilding with human help. On neutral worlds, human teachers were training other species in defensive strategies and technology. Humanity's 2 centuries of hidden research were being shared, turning a secret advantage into a common defense. It wasn't perfect. There were incidents. A few human soldiers abused their power and were court-martialed. Some species resented human influence even as they requested human protection. The transition from the old order to the new was messy and complicated, but it was happening. The galaxy was changing. 5 years after the Vrex War, Admiral Torres retired from military service. She was 55 years old, still young by modern standards, but the weight of command had aged her beyond her years. At her retirement ceremony, she stood before the assembled officers of the Earth Defense Force and gave her final speech. "When I took command during the crisis, I never imagined we'd still be here 5 years later. I thought we'd fight, we'd win, and we'd go home. But I learned that winning the war was just the beginning. Building the peace is harder, longer, and requires just as much courage as any battle." She looked at the young officers before her. "You are the new generation. You've trained in a military that is both powerful and restrained, that knows both how to fight and when to show mercy. Don't ever forget that balance. The day we become comfortable with war, the day we stop questioning whether violence is necessary, that's the day we become what we fought against." Torres paused, her voice softening. "I've killed a lot of people in my career. Some deserved it. Some were just following orders. All of them haunt me. That's how it should be. The moment you can kill without it affecting you is the moment you lose your humanity. Stay human. That's my final order." She saluted, and the assembly saluted back. Then she walked out of the command center for the last time, ready to finally go home and try to find peace. 10 years after the Vrex War, Ambassador Marcus Chen gave a speech at the memorial on Earth. The black stone wall now held 5 million names, lit by eternal flames. It had become a place of pilgrimage where people came to remember and reflect. "We built this memorial not to celebrate victory," Chen said to the gathered crowd. "We built it to remember the cost. 5 million people died because someone believed strength meant they could take what they wanted. We proved them wrong. But the lesson isn't that we're stronger. The lesson is that strength without wisdom leads only to tragedy." He touched one of the names on the wall. Jingwei, age 7. She wanted to be a musician. I know because her mother told me in a letter. She's one of 5 million stories that ended too soon. We honor them not by seeking revenge, but by making sure no other civilization has to build a memorial like this. Chen looked at the crowd. He saw humans, but also aliens. Wrecks who had come to pay respects. Species that Earth had defended. All of them united in remembering. "The galaxy is different now," Chen continued. "We have the Mutual Defense Alliance. We have cooperation instead of conquest. We have hope instead of fear. But it's fragile. It requires constant work. It requires every generation to choose peace, even when war seems easier." He smiled slightly. Humanity almost destroyed itself once. We learned from that mistake. Now we're teaching the galaxy what we learned. Not through force, but through example. We showed that the strong can protect the weak. We showed that victory doesn't require brutality. We showed that it's possible to be both powerful and peaceful. Chen's voice grew stronger. "So remember this day. Remember these names. Remember why we fought and what we fought for. And remember that the greatest strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the wisdom to turn enemies into friends." 20 years after the Vrex War, a new generation had grown up in the changed galaxy. Children who had been born after the conflict learned about it in history classes. To them, the Mutual Defense Alliance was normal. Human ships patrolling the space lanes was normal. The idea of aggressive conquest seemed as ancient as the wars of Earth's distant past. In a classroom on a Pelian world, a young student asked her teacher a question. Why didn't humanity conquer everyone after the Vrex War? They were the strongest. Isn't that what strong species do? The teacher, an old Pelian with fading colors, clicked thoughtfully. That's an excellent question. The answer is that humanity learned something most species never do. They learned that being strong and being right aren't the same thing. They learned that true power isn't about forcing others to obey. It's about inspiring others to cooperate. The teacher pulled up images of the Vrex War. When humanity revealed their strength, they had a choice. They could have used fear to dominate. Instead, they used their power to protect. They showed restraint when they could have shown cruelty. And that's why we trust them, not because we fear their weapons, but because we trust their judgment. Another student raised a tentacle. But what if humanity changes? What if someday they decide to conquer? The teacher nodded. Then we'll stop them. That's what the alliance is for. We're all watching each other, keeping each other honest. Humanity watches us. We watch them. Everyone watches everyone. It's not perfect, but it's better than what came before. On Earth, in the rebuilt city of Beijing, an old woman sat in a garden that had been planted on the site of the old battlefield. She was 97 years old, one of the last survivors of the Vrex attack. Children played around her, laughing in the sunshine. A young man approached, carrying a camera. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm doing a documentary about the Vrex War. Would you be willing to share your story?" The old woman smiled. "Which story do you want?" "The one about the bombs falling. The terror in the shelters? The days we didn't know if anyone would survive?" "I want the true story," the young man said. The old woman gestured for him to sit. "The true story is this. I was in Shanghai when the bombs fell. I lost my husband, my daughter, and my grandson. For years I hated the Vrex. I wanted them all dead. I wanted revenge." She paused, looking at the children playing. "But then I met a young Vrex woman. She had come to Earth as part of the cultural exchange program. She was terrified, expected to be hated. Instead, I invited her to tea. We talked. She told me about losing her brother in the war, about her fears for her people's future. And I realized something." "What?" the young man asked. "That hate is a poison. It doesn't hurt the people you hate. It only hurts you. The Vrex who attacked us are dead or imprisoned. The Vrex who remain are just people, trying to build a better future. If I spend my remaining years hating them, then they've killed me too. Just more slowly," she smiled. "So I chose to live, to forgive, to help build the peace that my family died for. That's the real story of the Vrex War. Not the battles and the weapons, but the choice to be better than our anger. The young man wiped his eyes. That's beautiful. It's hard, the old woman corrected. But it's necessary. Because if we can't forgive, then war never really ends. It just keeps echoing through generations. 50 years after the Vrex War, Ambassador Marcus Chen died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92. His funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the galaxy. Even the Vrex sent a delegation, including elderly Kelvar, who had risen to become his people's ambassador. At the service, Kelvar spoke. Marcus Chen was my enemy once. He represented everything I thought I hated about humanity. Their weakness, their peace, their mercy. But he taught me that these things weren't weaknesses. They were strengths I had been too blind to see. The old Vrex's voice shook slightly. He gave my people a second chance when we deserved destruction. He showed us that change was possible. Because of him, because of what humanity chose to be, my children and grandchildren live in a galaxy of hope instead of conquest. I will spend my remaining days trying to honor his example. Earth's current president spoke next. Ambassador Chen once told me that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our choice to hide them, to spend 2 centuries building peace while maintaining the capacity for war. He said that anyone can be strong. The hard part is being strong without needing everyone to know it. She looked at the assembled crowd. We live in the galaxy Marcus Chen helped build. A galaxy where strength protects rather than conquers, where peace is defended rather than just hoped for, where different species work together instead of fighting for dominance. This is his legacy. This is what he fought for. As the service ended and people filed out, Admiral Torres's daughter, who had followed in her mother's footsteps, stood looking at Chen's memorial plaque. It read simply, Marcus Chen, Earth Ambassador. He taught the galaxy that peace is not the absence of strength, but the wisdom to use it well. A young officer approached her. Admiral Chen, the new recruits are asking about the Vrex War. They want to know what it was like. What should I tell them? Admiral Sarah Chen considered the question. Tell them it was necessary. Tell them it was terrible. Tell them that we won because we were strong, but we made peace because we were wise. Tell them that the goal isn't to be the strongest species in the galaxy. The goal is to make sure strength is used to protect, not to dominate. She looked at the young officer. And tell them that every generation has to make that choice for themselves. We can't rest on what our ancestors did. We have to keep choosing peace, keep choosing restraint, keep choosing to be better. That's the real lesson of the Vrex War. 100 years after the Vrex War, the Galactic Council held a centennial commemoration. The original Vrex War generation had passed into history, but their legacy remained. The Mutual Defense Alliance had expanded to include nearly every species in the known galaxy. Aggressive conquest had become rare, not because it was impossible, but because it was no longer profitable or practical. A young historian gave a presentation analyzing the war's impact. The Vrex War changed everything. Before it, the galaxy operated on the assumption that peaceful species would be protected by treaties and goodwill. After it, we understood that peace must be defended. But the crucial lesson wasn't about military strength. It was about how strength should be used. The historian displayed images from the war and its aftermath. Humanity could have conquered the galaxy. They had the power. They had the momentum. Instead, they chose to build an alliance. They chose to share their technology rather than hoard it. They chose to be partners rather than masters. That choice defined the next century of galactic history. An audience member asked, "But aren't we dependent on human military power? What if they ever decide to use it against us?" The historian smiled. That question was asked 100 years ago, too. The answer is the same. Yes, we're dependent on human military strength just as they're dependent on Pelian manufacturing, Aquelian agriculture, and Vrex engineering. We're all interdependent now. That's not a weakness. It's what prevents conflict. The historian concluded, the real genius of post-war galactic order isn't military strength. It's interconnection. We've built a galaxy where attacking someone else means attacking yourself, because we all rely on each other. The humans didn't conquer us. They didn't need to. They just showed us that cooperation works better than conquest. As the commemoration ended, a group of students from mixed species gathered outside. They were friends, studying together, planning futures that would involve all their species working together. They had grown up in a galaxy where the Vrex War was ancient history, where humanity's hidden strength was just an interesting fact, where peace was the norm rather than the exception. Do you think it will last? One of the VREX students asked. The peace, I mean. A human student shrugged. My grandmother says peace is like a garden. You have to tend it every day. Stop tending it and it turns to weeds, so I guess it lasts as long as we keep working at it. That's a lot of work, a Pelian student observed. Yeah, the human agreed. But it's better than the alternative. They walked together into the future, friends from species that had once been enemies, building on the foundation that had been laid with such cost so many years before. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was better. And for those who remembered the VREX War, who remembered Earth burning and 5 million names on a black stone wall, better was enough, because they knew the cost of forgetting. They knew what happened when species believed strength meant they could take what they wanted. They knew the price of peace and the weight of power. Most importantly, they knew that the real strength wasn't in the weapons or the ships or the technology. It was in the choice to use that strength wisely, with restraint, with mercy. That was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not their weapons, but their wisdom. Not their power, but their example. Not their victory, but their choice of what to do with that victory. And the galaxy, watching, learning, struggling, was slowly becoming something better. The memorial on Earth still stood with its 5 million names. People still came to remember, but now they also came to reflect on what those deaths had purchased. A galaxy of peace, a future of hope, a choice to be better. In the end, that was the real answer to the VREX attack. Not revenge, not domination, but transformation. They had attacked Earth believing humanity was weak. Instead, they had awakened humanity's strength. And that strength, wielded with wisdom, had changed everything. The galaxy would never forget the lesson. Those who attack the peaceful must face the power of those who choose peace not from weakness but from strength. Those who mistake restraint for weakness will learn the difference. And those who learn that lesson, who choose cooperation over conquest, will find humanity to be the strongest ally they could ever ask for. That was the legacy of the VREX War. That was the truth the galaxy had learned. And that truth, more than any weapon, was what kept the peace.
The deep silence of space was broken by the soft beeping of sensors aboard the patrol ship Stargazer. Commander James Reed looked up from his data pad, his tired eyes scanning the bridge crew's faces. They had been out here for 3 weeks, searching the border of human space for any signs of Empire activity. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, but something felt different today. "Sir, we're picking up strange energy readings," said Tom Wilson, the young sensor officer. His fingers moved quickly across the glowing screen as he tried to make sense of the data. "I've never seen anything like this before." Reed walked over to Tom's station, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The reading on the screen showed a massive energy spike, bigger than anything a normal ship could produce. It reminded him of something he had seen years ago, during the early days of the war. "Send the data to my screen," Reed ordered, walking back to his chair. As the information appeared before him, his eyes went wide. He remembered now. 3 years ago, the RSS Dauntless, one of the most advanced research ships ever built, had disappeared while testing a new type of engine. The energy signature they were seeing now matched the Dauntless's experimental drive perfectly. Reed pressed a button on his chair. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." Red lights started flashing throughout the ship as crew members ran to their posts. If the Empire had found the Dauntless first, they needed to be ready for anything. "Sir, detecting a large debris field ahead," reported Lisa Green from navigation. "But there's something weird about it. The pieces, they're moving in patterns." Reed ordered the ship to move closer, but carefully. 5 other patrol ships followed behind the Stargazer, their weapons ready. As they got nearer to the debris field, everyone on the bridge went quiet. Through the main window, they could see pieces of metal floating in space, but they weren't just drifting. They were swimming through the void like schools of fish. "Get me a closer look at those fragments," Reed commanded. The ship's camera zoomed in on the nearest pieces. They weren't regular debris at all. Each piece was covered in tiny machines that glowed with a faint blue light. As they watched, Some of the pieces started joining together, forming larger structures. "Alert!" shouted Tom. Energy spike dead ahead. The debris field suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. Thousands of pieces started moving at once, forming a massive shape in space. Reed couldn't believe his eyes. The pieces were creating what looked like a giant version of the Dauntless, but different. This ship was bigger, with strange patterns running across its hull that glowed with the same blue light as the tiny machines. "Sir, we're being hailed," reported Mike Brown, the communications officer. His voice shook a little. "The signal. It's using an old research fleet code. It's the Dauntless." Reed took a deep breath. "Put it on screen." The main screen flickered to life, but instead of showing a person, it showed patterns of light that moved like waves. A voice came through the speakers, but it sounded strange, like many people talking at once. "This is the RSS Dauntless," the voice said. "We have been waiting for you." Reed leaned forward in his chair. "This is Commander James Reed of the Galactic Defense Fleet. Dauntless, you've been missing for 3 years. What happened to you?" The patterns on the screen changed color as the voice spoke again. "We evolved, Commander. The accident with our experimental drive changed us, changed everything. We are more than a ship now. We are something new." As if to prove the point, parts of the huge ship started changing shape. Sections moved and transformed, showing that the entire vessel was made of the same tiny machines they had seen earlier. Reed realized they weren't just looking at a ship anymore. They were looking at a completely new form of life. "Our sensors show Empire ships approaching this sector," the Dauntless said. "They must have detected our energy signature too. We need your help, Commander. We have discovered things out here, learned secrets that could change the course of the war, but we need time to finish our work." Reed looked at his crew. They all waited for his decision. The Empire had been pushing deeper into human space every month, winning battle after battle with their superior numbers. If the Dauntless really had found something that could help turn the tide, "What do you need us to do?" Reed asked. The pattern of lights shifted again. "Help us defend this position for the next 6 hours. We are still gathering strength, still learning to control our new form. Once we are ready, we can show you what we have become." Reed nodded. "All ships, battle formation Delta. Whatever's coming, we're going to give the Dauntless the time it needs." The patrol ships moved into position around the transformed research vessel, their weapons charged and ready. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the first Empire ships appeared out of warp. 3 massive battle cruisers, each one big enough to carry thousands of troops. Reed's 6 patrol ships looked tiny in comparison. "Empire vessels approaching weapons range," Tom reported. His voice was steady now, focused on the job at hand. "They're charging weapons. Hold position," Reed ordered. "Let them make the first move." The Empire ships spread out in a classic attack formation. They probably thought this would be an easy fight. 6 small patrol ships against 3 battle cruisers. The math was simple, but they didn't know about the Dauntless. The first shots came from the Empire ships, bright beams of energy slicing through space. Reed's ships returned fire, their smaller weapons doing little damage against the cruiser's strong shields. But they weren't trying to win. They just needed to buy time. Behind them, the Dauntless continued to change. Its surface rippled like water as more and more pieces joined its structure. The blue glow grew brighter, and strange new weapons began to form along its hull. "Commander," the many-voiced being that was now the Dauntless called, "you should move your ships back. We are ready to show you what we have learned." Reed didn't hesitate. "All ships, fall back. Give them room." As the patrol ships moved away, the Dauntless began to move. But it didn't move like a normal ship. Instead, it seemed to flow through space, its entire form shifting and changing as it approached the Empire cruisers. The enemy ships tried to target it, but their weapons passed right through gaps that opened in the Dauntless's body. Then the Dauntless attacked. Streams of those tiny machines poured out from its hull, surrounding the nearest Empire ship. Where they touched the cruiser's hull, the metal began to change color, being transformed into more of the same machines. The Empire ship tried to escape, but it was too late. Within minutes, it had been completely absorbed into the Dauntless's mass. The other two cruisers turned to run, but the Dauntless was faster now. Much faster. It caught them both, its swarm of machines taking them apart piece by piece and adding their material to itself. In less than 10 minutes, all three Empire ships were gone. Reed stared at the main screen, his mouth open in shock. The Dauntless was now almost twice as big as before, its surface rippling with power from the absorbed ships. "Now you understand, Commander," the Dauntless said. "We are no longer just a ship. We are the future, and we are ready to help humanity fight back." Reed looked at his crew. They all wore the same expression, a mixture of awe and hope. For the first time since the war began, they had seen something that could actually stand up to the Empire's massive fleets. The ship that had disappeared hadn't just come back. It had returned as something that could change everything. "Dauntless," Reed said, "I think it's time we told Fleet Command about you. They're going to want to hear this story." The patterns of light on the screen swirled faster. "Yes, Commander. It's time to share what we have become." The Empire thought they could defeat humanity by having bigger ships and more weapons. "We will show them that humanity's greatest strength is its ability to adapt, to change, to become something new." "The war is about to change, Commander Reed. Everything is about to change." Dr. Anna Thompson stood in what used to be the main lab of the Dauntless, though it looked nothing like it had 3 years ago. The walls seemed to breathe, covered in flowing patterns of tiny machines that pulsed with soft blue light. She reached out to touch one of the walls, watching as the machines moved around her hand like water. The accident that had changed everything happened during a routine test of the new warp drive. Thompson remembered that day clearly. The strange readings from the engine core, the sudden surge of energy, and then the feeling of being torn apart and put back together. When she woke up, she wasn't just herself anymore. She was part of something bigger. "Doctor, the human fleet ships are requesting more information," said Will Cooper, one of her fellow survivors. Like her, he wasn't quite human anymore. His body looked normal, but tiny machines moved under his skin, connecting him to the ship's systems. All 37 surviving crew members were the same way now. Thompson nodded, walking over to what used to be a regular computer terminal. Now it was a living interface, responding to her thoughts as much as her touch. "Show me their questions," she said. The screen filled with text as the ship's consciousness shared the information with her mind. The fleet wanted to know how they had survived, how they had changed, what they could do. They were both excited and scared by what they had seen the Dauntless do to those Empire ships. Thompson understood their fear. She had been scared too, at first. "Start recording," she said, and began to explain. "The accident merged our experimental warp drive with the ship's AI system, but it did more than that. The energy release changed the basic structure of everything on board: metal, plastic, even organic matter. It turned everything into these self-replicating machines, these nanites, and we changed with it." She paused, remembering those first confused days. "We thought we were dead at first. But then we started to feel the ship around us. We could control the nanites with our thoughts. The ship's AI merged with our minds, connecting us all together. We became something new, not just human, not just machine, but both." As she spoke, the room around her shifted and changed, showing images of what she was describing. The walls formed 3D pictures of the transformation process, of the nanites at work, of the crew learning to control their new abilities. The Dauntless wasn't just a ship anymore. It was alive, and they were all part of its nervous system. "Over the past 3 years, we've been learning, growing, evolving," Thompson continued. "The nanites can break down almost any material and rebuild it, adding it to our mass. Every piece of space debris we absorbed taught us something new, Every asteroid we consumed made us stronger. We stayed hidden, watching the war from a distance, until we were ready. The recording paused as Cooper called out, "Doctor, we're detecting more Empire ships entering the sector. A lot more." Thompson walked to the main viewing area, which formed around her like a bubble of clear material. In the distance, she could see the Empire ships appearing. Not just 3 this time, but 30. They must have called for backup after losing those first ships. "They want to see what we can really do," Thompson said. She could feel the excitement running through the ship's systems, shared by all the crew members. "Let's show them." The Dauntless began to move, but not as a single unit. Instead, it split apart into dozens of smaller sections, each one controlled by a different crew member's consciousness. The Empire ships opened fire, but their weapons couldn't lock onto the constantly shifting targets. Thompson directed her section of the ship toward the nearest Empire vessel, feeling the thrill of movement through space. The nanites responded to her thoughts, forming new shapes and structures as needed. Other sections of the Dauntless moved with her, controlled by her fellow crew members, all of them connected through the ship's shared consciousness. "Remember," she sent through their mental link, "we're not just fighting. We're learning. Everything they throw at us makes us stronger." The Empire ships tried new tactics, launching fighters and missiles, attempting to overwhelm them with numbers. But each weapon, each piece of technology they used, just gave the Dauntless more patterns to learn from, more materials to absorb, more ways to evolve. Thompson watched through 1,000 different sensors as her crew worked together. John Baker, who used to be an engineer, had figured out how to turn the Empire's own shields against them, using the nanites to slip through the tiny gaps in their energy fields. Mary Roberts, once their weapons officer, had developed a way to redirect enemy fire back at their ships. The battle looked like a dance, with pieces of the Dauntless flowing around the Empire ships like schools of fish swimming through the ocean. Wherever the nanites touched enemy hull plating, the metal began to change, becoming part of their collective. Some Empire ships tried to self-destruct rather than be absorbed, but even their explosions just gave the Dauntless more energy to use. "Doctor," Cooper called out, his voice excited. "Look at what we just absorbed from their command ship." Thompson connected to the ship's database, and new information flowed into her mind. The Empire ships had been carrying data about their newest weapons, their battle plans, their secret research. As the Dauntless absorbed their computers, it learned everything they knew. "They're trying to build their own version of us," Thompson said, scanning through the stolen data. "They found traces of our energy signature and have been trying to recreate the accident that changed us. But they don't understand. They can't just copy what happened. We're not just a weapon or a piece of technology. We're something that evolved naturally, even if the evolution happened quickly." The last Empire ship vanished into the growing mass of the Dauntless. They were even bigger now, their understanding of technology and space and energy growing with every passing moment. Thompson could feel new ideas forming in the shared consciousness of ship and crew, new possibilities opening up. "Send a message to the human fleet," she said. Tell them we're ready to explain everything. But they need to understand, we're not just a super weapon they can point at the enemy. We're the next step in human evolution, a bridge between flesh and machine. And we have so much to teach them." As she spoke, the Dauntless reformed itself into a single unit, but different from before. Its shape now reflected everything they had learned in the battle, more efficient, more powerful. The hull rippled with patterns of light as the nanites processed all the new information they had absorbed. Thompson looked out at the stars, feeling the presence of her crew around her, all of them connected through the living network of the ship. They had lost their old lives in that accident 3 years ago, but they had gained something incredible. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were pioneers, exploring what it meant to be human in an age of endless possibilities. The human fleet ships approached cautiously, their sensors trying to make sense of what the Dauntless had become. Thompson smiled, knowing that everything was about to change. The Empire thought they were fighting a war of ships and weapons, but they had accidentally started something much bigger. The next step in the evolution of life itself. Prepare the main lab for visitors, she told the ship's consciousness. It's time to share what we've learned. And it's time to show humanity that there's more than one way to win a war. Sometimes the best victory isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming something they never imagined possible. The Empire's Grand Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror, watching as his invasion fleet gathered. 500 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled, waited for his command. The humans had somehow developed a powerful new weapon, but he was certain that sheer numbers would overwhelm whatever tricks they had discovered. All ships report ready, Admiral, his second-in-command reported. The humans have only minimal defenses along their border. They don't know we're coming. The Admiral smiled. The Empire had spent months planning this attack. They would strike 3 human worlds at once. Too many targets for their mysterious new weapon to defend. Victory was certain. Begin the attack, he ordered. Send in the first wave. 200 ships jumped into warp, heading for the human colonies. The Admiral watched them go, already imagining his triumph. But as the ships reached their targets, something strange happened. The sensor readings made no sense. Energy patterns appeared from nowhere, spreading through space like ripples in a pond. Admiral, his sensor officer shouted. Something's wrong with the first wave. Their signals, they're changing. The Admiral rushed to the sensor display. The dots representing his ships were transforming, their energy signatures shifting to match something else. Something familiar. His blood ran cold as he realized what he was seeing. The Dauntless had been waiting for them. Out in space, the Empire ships found themselves surrounded. The debris fields they had dismissed as space junk came alive, revealing themselves as parts of the transformed research vessel. But the Dauntless wasn't alone anymore. In the months since its return, it had been teaching others. 3 more ships like the Dauntless emerged from hiding. Former human vessels that had volunteered to undergo the same transformation. Their crews had merged with their ships, becoming new hybrid life forms. They moved through space like living creatures, their nanite bodies flowing around the Empire vessels. The Admiral watched in horror as his ships were absorbed one by one, their crews and technology becoming part of the growing swarm. Each lost ship made the human vessels stronger, smarter, more adaptable. The second wave of Empire ships jumped in to help, but they only provided more material for the transformation. Pull back, the Admiral ordered. All ships, retreat. But it was too late. The hybrid ships had learned from every battle, every encounter. They knew exactly how to counter Empire tactics. The Dauntless led the attack on the Conqueror, its surface rippling with stolen energy. Empire weapons fire passed harmlessly through gaps that opened in its structure. Fighters launched from the flagship's bays, but the nanites simply absorbed them, adding their pilots' knowledge to the collective consciousness. Inside the Dauntless, the crew worked as one mind. They had learned to split their attention between thousands of tasks, each person controlling millions of nanites while staying connected to the whole. As they approached the flagship, they could sense the fear of the Empire crews, their desperation as they realized their weapons were useless. Your weapons can't hurt us, the Dauntless broadcast on all frequencies, its message a blend of many voices speaking as one. Your shields can't stop us. Everything you throw at us only makes us stronger. But you don't have to fight. You don't have to die. You can join us. Some Empire crews chose to surrender, fascinated by what the humans had become. Others fought to the end, their ships torn apart and rebuilt into new forms. The Admiral watched his mighty fleet disappear piece by piece, transformed into something beyond his understanding. How? He demanded, pounding his fist on the command console. How did they do this? How did they create such power? The answer came as the nanites began seeping through the flagship's hull, turning metal and plastic into flowing rivers of tiny machines. The Dauntless's consciousness touched the minds of the Empire crew, showing them the truth. We didn't create this power, the many voices explained. We discovered it. The accident that changed us wasn't a weapon design. It was evolution taking the new path. We are what happens when humanity stops trying to build bigger guns and starts learning to change itself. The Admiral felt the nanites touching his skin, offering him a choice. He could join them, become part of something greater, or he could die with his ship. Around him, crew members made their own choices. Some embraced the change, their bodies dissolving into the nanite swarm. Others fought, but their resistance was futile. In orbit around the human colonies, the battle was already over. The Empire's massive invasion fleet had been completely absorbed, its technology and knowledge added to the growing power of the hybrid ships. But the Dauntless and its companions weren't interested in just winning battles. "Look at what we can build," they told the surrendered Empire crews, using their combined technology to create new structures in space. Space stations formed from clouds of nanites, able to repair and upgrade themselves. Defensive systems that could think and adapt. Power sources that drew energy from the fabric of space itself. The Admiral watched in amazement as his flagship was transformed around him. The rigid metal walls became flowing surfaces of light and energy. His crew, those who had accepted the change, began to understand their new existence. They weren't just defeated enemies anymore. They were becoming part of a new form of life. "Your Empire thought the only way to grow stronger was to conquer others," the Dauntless explained. "But true strength comes from adaptation, from evolution, from learning to become something new. This isn't the end of your civilization. It's the beginning of something greater." As news of the failed invasion spread, more Empire ships arrived, not to fight, but to learn. The hybrid ships shared their knowledge freely, teaching others how to make the transformation. What had started as an accident aboard one research vessel was becoming a revolution that would change both civilizations forever. The Admiral, his pride finally broken, asked the question that burned in his mind. "What will happen to us now? What will we become?" The answer came not in words, but in visions shared through the nanite network. He saw futures where human and Empire technology merged into new forms, where the boundary between living and machine became meaningless, where consciousness could flow between stars like light. "We will become what we choose to become," the Dauntless told him. The war between our peoples was about controlling territory, resources, technology. But we found something better than control. We found transformation. Every battle makes us smarter. Every encounter teaches us something new, and every person who joins us brings new ideas and possibilities. The last pieces of the Conqueror dissolved into the nanite swarm, its energy and materials rebuilt into new forms. The Admiral felt his own consciousness expanding, connecting to the vast network of minds that now flowed through space. He understood at last. The Empire hadn't lost a war today. Instead, both humanity and the Empire had won something far greater: the power to evolve beyond their limitations. In the space where a battle fleet had once gathered, something new now grew. Not weapons, not ships, but the seeds of a civilization that would reshape the galaxy. The Dauntless led the way, but it was only the beginning. The real revolution was just starting, and it would change everything. General Robert Wilson paced back and forth in the main conference room of Earth Defense Command. The walls were covered with screens showing the spread of the Dauntless effect across space. More and more ships were choosing to transform, both human and Empire vessels. The war was ending, but not in any way anyone had expected. "What happens when everyone has this power?" he asked the hologram floating above the conference table. The image showed Dr. Thompson's face, though it wasn't quite human anymore. Patterns of light moved across her skin, showing her connection to the nanite network. "That's what we're trying to figure out," Thompson replied. Her voice echoed slightly, as if many people were speaking just slightly out of sync. "We've discovered something that could unite both our civilizations, but it could also tear them apart if we're not careful." The general stopped pacing and leaned on the table. "The Empire is asking for peace talks. They say they want to discuss cooperation in studying this transformation process. Can we trust them?" Thompson's image flickered as she considered the question. The Dauntless had absorbed enough Empire ships and crew to understand how their leaders thought. "They're scared," she said finally. "Not just of us, but of falling behind. They see their crews choosing to join us, and they know they can't stop it. They want to control the process, guide it." "And what do you want?" Wilson asked. He had known Thompson for years before the accident that changed her. She had been brilliant but cautious, always worried about the effects of new technology. Now she was that new technology, and he couldn't read her like he used to. The hologram shifted, showing not just Thompson but the entire transformed crew of the Dauntless. They stood together, their bodies glowing with internal light, connected by streams of flowing nanites. "We want to understand what we've become," they said together. "We're not just weapons. We're not just ships. We're something new, and we need time to learn what that means." Outside the conference room windows, Earth hung like a blue jewel in space. Defense platforms orbited the planet, some of them already showing signs of transformation as their crews volunteered to join the evolution. The change wasn't forced. That was one rule Thompson and her crew had insisted on. Each person had to choose to become part of the network. "The politicians are worried," Wilson said, turning back to the hologram. "Some of them think we should try to contain this, limit who can transform and when. Others want to speed it up, turn our whole fleet into copies of the Dauntless right away. Everyone wants to control it." The hologram showed scenes from recent events: Empire ships surrendering, crews choosing transformation, new hybrid vessels taking shape in space. "Control is an illusion," Thompson's voice said softly. "We're not creating a weapon or a tool. We're watching the next step in evolution. You can't control evolution. You can only learn to work with it." Wilson watched as one of the defense platforms outside began to change, its surface flowing like liquid metal as its crew joined the network. "What about the people who don't want to change? What happens to them?" "They live their lives as they choose," Thompson replied. "We're not here to force anyone. But they need to understand. The galaxy is changing. The old ways of thinking about ships and crews, about weapons and wars, about life itself, those ways are becoming outdated." A junior officer rushed into the conference room, holding a datapad. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer colonies. Empire diplomatic ships are arriving, but they're not like anything we've seen before. They're growing their own docking ports to match our stations." Wilson looked at Thompson's hologram. "Your influence." The image smiled. "We shared some ideas with them. They're learning that adaptation is better than conquest. Their diplomats are coming with open minds, ready to discuss a future neither of us could have imagined a few months ago." The general sat down heavily in his chair. The war room that had directed humanity's defense for so long was starting to feel like a relic of the past. "So what do we do now? How do we handle this transition?" Thompson's hologram walked around the table, leaving trails of light in the air. "We learn. We explore. We figure out what it means to be human when the line between biology and technology, between individual and collective, becomes fluid. The Empire's diplomats aren't coming to negotiate boundaries anymore. They're coming to discuss possibilities." More reports started flowing in from across human space. Ships were changing, stations were evolving, and with each transformation, the network of minds grew stronger and smarter. But it wasn't just about power anymore. Each new consciousness that joined brought new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of seeing the universe. "There are risks," Thompson admitted. "We're changing what it means to be human, to be alive. Some will resist. Some will try to use this power for their own ends. That's why we need time, need understanding. We need to learn how to guide this evolution without controlling it, how to grow without losing what makes us who we are." Wilson stood and walked to the window, watching Earth turn below. "How do we protect ourselves if this goes wrong? What if some of the transformed ships decide to become conquerors?" The hologram filled with stars, showing the growing network of transformed ships and stations spreading through space. "The network itself is the protection," Thompson explained. No single consciousness can dominate it. We learn from each other, balance each other. The Empire crews who joined us brought their knowledge of conquest and control, and learned why those things are limitations, not strengths. A message flashed on the main screen. The Empire diplomats would arrive within the hour. But they weren't coming to discuss borders or treaties. They wanted to talk about joining the transformation project, about working together to understand and guide this new form of existence. It's time to choose, Thompson said, her hologram returning to a single figure. Not just as individuals, but as civilizations. Do we embrace this change, learn to work with it, or do we try to fight it, to control it, to limit it? Because one thing is certain, we can't go back. The universe has shown us a new path, and we have to decide how to walk it. Wilson looked at the reports flowing in from across space, at the Empire ships approaching with new ideas instead of weapons, at the defense platforms outside slowly transforming into something new and wonderful. He thought about all the lives lost in the war, all the battles fought over things that suddenly seemed small and unimportant. Maybe, he said slowly, the choice isn't between controlling it or fighting it. Maybe the choice is learning to trust. Trust in evolution, in adaptation, in the idea that becoming something new doesn't mean losing who we are. Thompson's hologram smiled, and for a moment she looked almost human again. That's exactly what we've been trying to learn out here among the stars. We're not just ships anymore, not just crews, not just weapons or tools. We're the next step in the story of life itself. And the story is just beginning. 10 years had passed since the Dauntless first reappeared in human space. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Where there were once military borders and contested zones, now there were flowing rivers of nanite ships, carrying knowledge and consciousness between the stars. The space station Freedom Point hung in orbit around a neutral world, its surface constantly shifting and changing as it adapted to the needs of its visitors. Both human and Empire ships docked there, some still in their original forms, others transformed into hybrid vessels that seemed to swim through space like silverfish. Inside the station's main gathering space, Dr. Thompson walked among the crowds. Her body still looked mostly human, though patterns of light still flowed beneath her skin. She had chosen to keep this form to help others understand the transformation, to show them that changing didn't mean losing yourself. The latest survey results are in, said Michael Chen, one of her original crew members. Like her, he had maintained a mostly human appearance. About 30% of both human and Empire populations have chosen to join the network in some way. The rest are watching, waiting, learning. Thompson nodded, watching the mixture of people around them. Some were fully transformed, their bodies made entirely of flowing nanites. Others wore simple neural interfaces that let them connect to the network while keeping their original forms. And many remained completely unchanged, choosing to interact with the new civilization in traditional ways. They're finding their own balance, she said. That's what we hoped for. Not everyone transforming at once, but each person and each community choosing their own path, their own speed of change. The station's walls shifted, creating a new meeting space as a group of Empire scientists arrived. They had come to share their latest research on combining traditional Empire technology with the nanite systems. Their ships weren't fully transformed, but they had learned to grow and adapt in their own unique ways. Remember when they wanted to turn this into a weapon? Chen asked, smiling at the memory. Now they're using it to build hospitals that can heal any injury, ships that can explore deep space without endangering their crews, stations that can grow food from stellar energy. Thompson walked to a viewing window, watching the traffic flow around the station. Each ship was different now. Some were traditional designs, some were fully transformed like the Dauntless, and many were somewhere in between. The rigid divisions between human and machine, between individual and collective, had become fluid. We're getting signals from the exploration fleet, Chen said, his eyes glowing as he connected to the station's communication network. They found something interesting in the galactic core. The station created a display in the air, showing the fleet's discovery. A massive structure floated in space, ancient beyond imagining, made of technology that looked surprisingly like their own nanites. The exploration fleet, a mix of transformed and traditional ships working together, had found evidence that they weren't the first civilization to discover this path. Life finds a way to grow, to change, to become more than it was, Thompson said, studying the ancient structure. Maybe this is a natural progression. Maybe every civilization eventually discovers that the boundaries they built around themselves are just limitations waiting to be overcome. Around them, the station hummed with activity. In one area, human children played with Empire young, their neural interfaces letting them share thoughts and feelings directly. In another, scientists from both civilizations worked together, using the nanite network to run complex simulations of stellar phenomena. The network spans half the galaxy now, Chen reported. But it's not just about distance. It's about depth, about understanding. Each person who joins brings new ideas, new ways of thinking. We're not just sharing technology. We're sharing perspectives, cultures, dreams. A group of unmodified humans walked past, tourists from Earth coming to see the new civilization that was growing among the stars. They looked nervous but curious, watching the transformed beings around them with wonder instead of fear. That was a change too. People were learning that different didn't mean dangerous. The Empire's central worlds have opened their universities to human students, Thompson said, accessing the latest news through her connection to the network. And Earth's governments are welcoming Empire families who want to study our history, our art, our ways of thinking. We're not just changing physically, we're growing together as peoples. Outside, a newly transformed ship was taking shape, its crew having just completed their joining with the nanite network. The process was smoother now, more controlled. They understood how to help people adapt, how to preserve what made them unique while connecting them to something larger. There's a message from the deep space probes, Chen said suddenly. They've detected signals from other galaxies, similar patterns to our technology. We might not be alone in discovering this path. Thompson smiled, remembering how it all started. A simple accident during a weapons test that had opened the door to something far greater. Send a response, she said. Let them know they're not alone either. The universe is full of life looking for ways to grow, to connect, to become more than it is. The station's walls shifted again, creating a huge observatory dome. The gathered crowds, both transformed and traditional, watched as the stars wheeled overhead. Among them were the children of transformed parents, born with the ability to connect to the network naturally. They were the next step, a generation that would never know the old divisions between flesh and machine, between self and other. The Dauntless is returning, Chen announced. The original ship, now vastly changed from its first transformation, emerged from deep space. It had been exploring the edges of known space, learning and growing. Its surface rippled with new patterns, new technologies discovered in the dark between stars. What did you find out there? Thompson asked through the network. The answer came not in words, but in images, emotions, ideas. The ship had discovered wonders beyond imagination. But more importantly, it had found new ways of thinking about existence itself. The station created a new space, a gathering place where everyone, transformed and traditional alike, could share in the Dauntless's discoveries. As the ship shared its experiences, Thompson looked around at what they had built. Not an empire, not a weapon, but a new way of living. We made the right choice, she said to Chen. When we decided not to use this as just a weapon, when we chose to share it, to let it grow naturally. We're not just surviving anymore. We're becoming something wonderful. Above them, the station's surface rippled like waves on an ocean. Ships came and went, each one carrying the story of transformation to new worlds. The children played, the scientists worked, and the boundaries between different forms of life grew ever more fluid. What do you think we'll become? Chen asked, watching a group of newly transformed beings learning to control their nanite bodies. Thompson looked out at the stars, feeling the vast network of minds stretching across space. Something new, she said. Something that remembers what it means to be human, or empire, or anything else, but isn't limited by those memories. We'll become what we choose to become, all of us together. The Dauntless pulsed with light, sharing one last discovery from deep space. It had found traces of even more advanced civilizations, signs that the path they were walking led to even greater transformations. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities they were only beginning to understand. The evolution never stops, Thompson said, smiling as she watched the next generation play among the stars. We just learn to guide it, to grow with it, to become part of something larger than ourselves. And that's the greatest discovery of all.